Well, we can get started here because I think we're all here,
Except for a guest.
except for our guest, who we did mention that he was going to be potentially a few minutes late tonight. So we'll get started with our agenda and work through, and then when he joins, we can switch over to Carl.
Yeah, and we do have Ben Avery joining us around the same time, 6:30, unless he's not needed, but it should be an interesting conversation because he's very involved in Hinesburg, and it sounds like we have another rep from Hinesburg on the call, so it could be a good brain dump.
Okay. That was the same guy that you had chatted about in email? Okay. Was there a chance he was going to come at a future date, or he just wanted to come tonight? I mean, he's welcome to join.
He could come in a future date. I circulated that email and I thought I got the vibe that I should have him log in today.
Okay.
He's happy to join anytime, really. It's a Zoom call. It's not like he's going anywhere to do it.
Yeah. He's welcome to join. I just didn't put him officially on the agenda as reserving time for him to.
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay.
Yep, if he's here though, let's talk to him. We can postpone some of the other things that are, longer term committee work. So. And
Carl has a hard stop anyways, because he has another, I think at 6:30. So he has another meeting too. All right. So with that, any adjustments to the agenda? So it sounds like we just chatted about that. But I don't see anyone else from the public here on the phone tonight, so it's just us.
We have a new member we could welcome.
Yes, Nick. He was here, I believe, last time, which I think, Virginia, you weren't able to join.
Neither was I.
Oh, and Andrew. Okay, so maybe it's a great opportunity to welcome Nick. So Nick, do you want to just give you well, let's just kick off the meeting, and then we'll give a brief intro to Nick, and Andrew and Virginia, you can introduce yourselves. All right. April 24th, it wasn't April, it was May
22nd.
Last meeting, 22nd. Any adjustments, comments to the meeting minutes from last month? Okay, great. We'll approve those as is. All right. So, Nick, do you want to just give a brief intro for yourself again, and then we can have Andrew and Virginia just kind of introduce themselves real quick.
Yeah. Hi, nice to meet you all. Some of you for the second time. But Nick Blanchet here, living in Richmond for about 4 years now. Over on Stonefence Road, which is just up West White Hill. Have a dog, 3 kids, and work as a software engineer.
Great. Hi.
Andrew, you want to just give a brief intro of yourself?
Sure thing. Welcome to meet you, Nick. My name's Andrew. I live in the Southview Hidden Pines neighborhood. Been here for about 6 years. Work as a local realtor. My second tour of duty through the housing committee after taking a hiatus for a few years.
Great. And Virginia, do you want to just mention?
Oh, sure. I'm Virginia Clark. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission at the moment. I used to be a veterinarian at the Richmond Animal Hospital, so I would have looked at your dog if I had still been working, but I retired to take this other non-paying job of being on the Planning Commission. I live on Hillview Road, and I've lived here for 42 years, and yeah.
Great. Yeah, Virginia has been a great resource in helping us navigate the housing committee, and a great partner with her work on the Planning Commission as well.
Yep, gotta be, the two have to work together. obviously. So it's good to keep in touch.
All right. The next one is, I know we had on the agenda a discussion of the Richmond revolving loan fund if necessary. This was just kind of a placeholder on our agenda. I don't know, Keith, if you had any additional commentary you wanted to share on that line item.
Yeah, there's not a lot of discussion, honestly, so it's really not necessary. It was not, Buttermilk was not approved for that revolving loan fund. And as such, they may pursue it on the next cycle, which will be coming up. I'm not sure if that loan fund has been reauthorized or not. That remains to be seen. But as far as fiscal year 23-24, they did not qualify for it. So this was a request from a member of the Planning Commission that they submit a application to the state. This is Buttermilk we're talking about. And what this loan fund does is it gives them, my understanding at least, it gives them the ability to access any town funds that would have been available, which were not, and other state funds. And I believe they can also get some low-cost loans. I'm not exactly sure what was going on. It was just kind of a hand-handed approach. But regardless of that, there's really nothing to report on that. But I don't want to dissuade the board from pursuing that as part of your, as what I'm calling your setting the environment. It certainly is a tool that could be utilized in the term that I don't particularly like, but in the toolbox, so to speak. So,
Yeah,
go ahead.
One, the point of the rental revolving loan fund was, it was set up by the state recently to try to encourage people to construct workforce housing, light, like affordable, not deeply affordable housing, but moderately affordable housing. So that was what this pot of money was designed for, is to encourage that. So, it's something definitely, I think, that we should, like Keith said, keep in the toolbox as a possibility. They were out of Buttermilk estimated its project to be $8 million to build building 2, and they were going to get a loan. They could have gotten a loan for up to $1 million or $1.5 million on top of their other financing. That might not have really been enough to make the project work for them, in exchange for some restrictions on the rental prices of the units. So it's like affordable housing light is what they envisioned it as. And there was going to be a match from the town or from a local employer, neither of which was forthcoming. But that would be something that we would want to think about in the future, is to have that ready if we thought this was going to be something that somebody might take on. We would want to have it be flexible enough to plug in either town or, generate employer interest in this housing program. Anyway.
Was this separate from the VHIP program that's still going on, or is it, because it sounds very similar?
VHIP, is that an older program?
No, that's like the one out right now. If you create any new housing and you're basically held to the VHFA guidelines there, if you build a 1-bedroom, you can get up to 10,000, 2-bedroom 20,000, 3-bedroom 30,000. You other guys know what I'm talking about?
I think maybe it's a little different, and their requirements only related to 65 to 120% of market value, which is higher than some of those other programs.
That's true, yeah.
I don't know.
I was just curious.
A bunch of different programs.
Yeah.
And this is basically just a loan you can get a loan.
Right.
So I don't know whether that program you're talking about actually money.
That's usually matching. It's like a grant program as opposed to a loan.
Yeah. This was bigger money, but as a loan.
Yeah.
Now, had they applied and been approved, is it conditional upon somebody matching that? or would they still qualify without a match in place from the town or a local employer?
Well, in the application guidelines, they said it's not required, but you're never probably going to get up to the point where you would be awarded it. It made it seem like you really needed to have some money kicked in by somebody else just to show that they were committed. So what Buttermilk was asking for was $500,000 basically to be for the town to give, and so this is the kind of thing like a housing fund might be useful for, that you would have money that you would be able to do that kind of thing. The town, I don't think, would ever have given Buttermilk $500,000 to do this project. So it was, a little bit of a pipe dream to think that they could. Although, even though Buttermilk said the town had to do that, in reading the application, the town does not have to kick in anything, or the employer, but you're never going to reach the threshold of getting the money if you don't have that.
So really, it's a
Is that-
wasted cost unless we have another commitment somewhere else, and it's not gonna be the town, it would have to be somebody, a private business.
It would have to be an employer who is really desperate for housing. And the Buttermilk was required to do these employer surveys, which they said they would do, the town being the largest employer. So the town was going to do one of the employer surveys. And I think Gabe Furman was going to do one because he's an employer. I don't know, BYCC. Anyway, so that was a requirement that you have these employer studies saying that they need housing, basically showing that they need housing. And then you have this money piece, this matching kicked in money to show that somebody's really interested enough to put money to
Are
it.
these matching funds alone, or are these just a matching funds given? They're completely forgivable. What is the terms of them?
The matching funds from the
Yeah.
town,
Yeah.
it's either in kind or money given. It's we will give you $500,000 towards
Yeah.
this project, or we will, abate your taxes for 10
Right,
years or something
Yeah.
like that. No, it's just a gift.
And that's
So-
the same for an employer, and it's a gift from an employer.
I don't know. It just said you can get funds or in-kind matches from an employer or the town. It seems, like a long shot, but
It
apparently-
seems
you have
like a big hurdle for communities to do that, for communities that are outside of like a Burlington or maybe a Rutland that has a little bit more industry there. I think Burlington, right? I think UVM has, invested a lot in workforce housing
right.
for their folks. So I could see them being at the table to offer this.
Virginia, do you happen to have that document so we could take a look at that language that, like, even for Burlington to give? I mean, that's a pretty small project, an $8 million building. Like UVM would be
So-
putting in $1 million for no returns and no stipulations. Seems a little.
Just Google rental revolving loan fund, and the page will come up, application guidelines. Go there, go look at the application guidelines. Or
So my
rental-
question is about the process, not about the actual loan. We can talk about tools in the toolbox, but if the tools aren't sharp or whatever the analogy is, if we're not ready to put them in a place, they don't do us any good. I heard about this, I think, on an email while I was bicycling in the Netherlands on our April break. And it was like 48-hour turnaround required. And I was like, this is not how you move forward. You gotta have a little bit of front end time to get it set up so it can work. So that's something that this group can do as well with the planning commission, is to say, if this revolving loan fund is something that we want to support, and that's a conversation by itself, how would we do that? And then how would we be ready for this or similar, VHIP or
Right.
whatever else?
Yep.
I think it calls for some premeditated, getting ourselves together. It's not like, oh, is this a good idea or not? It really screams for preparation. And I don't know if that's in the planning commission's purview or if that's something the planning commission would like us to work on. I just feel like if we leave it till the next time it comes up, then we'll have another one of these, well, that didn't work kind of experiences.
Well, this was all independent actors just doing something they wanted to do. And Keith and I have this discussion often about unilateral action by people. People, they just go out and do something, and Buttermilk wrote to one member of the planning commission, which is you're not supposed to engage with members of advisory committees, with people who want something from you. You're not supposed to have private conversations with them. And Buttermilk brought this up at the last minute. It's kind of on them that they brought it up at the last minute. And then this member of the planning commission went with it and took it to the select board on a weekend. The select board signed this letter saying we'd look into it, which was non-committal but useless, before the select board had even looked at it. The planning commission hadn't looked at it. The select board hadn't looked at it. It was all ad hoc and could make you tear your hair out if you're interested in process and in people, agreeing to work together on these problems. So that's the way it happened, and I am sure that things will probably happen that way again sometime or other, just people doing what they think is good to do. And so
Well, that's, individual initiative does a lot of stuff. Is there any reason to think that we should be preparing groundwork for future RRLF, or like leave it alone for now? But there's bigger fish to run after, or better things to do with our time.
So
yeah.
all I was gonna say is, last meeting we talked about building kind of this framework or strategies for encouraging either subsidized workforce housing here in Richmond. So I've added it to that list, and I see that we have our guest here. So I think that's something we can chat about in the second half of the meeting tonight, which I think would be helpful.
Thanks, Mark.
Great, and we have both our guests here.
We do,
so,
yes. And
that's great.
So welcome, Carl. Welcome, Benjamin. Thank you for joining the session this evening.
Hi.
So this is Carl. This is our Richmond Housing Committee here. Carl comes to us from Hinesburg, being the chair of the Hinesburg Affordable Housing Committee. And I believe he's worked with Benjamin as well in the past on some projects as well. Yeah. And I know, Benjamin, you were here invited by Andrew to come and join us this evening as well. So welcome.
Yes, Carl and I have worked together for what is an actual decade, not seems like a decade, on a project that looks like it is about to clear the final hurdle at Act 250.
Fantastic.
Hi, Dan.
That's awesome. So I know, Carl, we had invited you in. I know your time is limited this evening as you are jumping to another committee meeting, I believe, later on this evening. Yeah. I did send over just a few kind of starter questions that I was thinking of. I don't know if you had received that.
I did, yeah.
Thought that could be a good place to start. And I think from our committee's standpoint, I believe we're much younger in age in terms of how long we've been in existence here in Richmond. I think it was 2020 was that when the committee started. and I think we're still looking to find some of our footing in areas. So I think one of the first questions I had for you is, what has Hinesburg done to help lay the groundwork for supporting affordable housing in Hinesburg? And any tips or tricks or suggestions that you have weaved into that story would be helpful.
Yeah. So we became a committee in 2006. So we have been in existence a long time, and I actually was the person who thought we needed to get a committee. I worked in the community development program, and Montpelier had a committee, and I thought, well, Hinesburg should get an active group in the town to work on housing issues. There were housing issues back in 2006. They're only magnified in now 2024. And that might be why you all started in 2020, because things were pretty crazy. And it's not just because of COVID, but obviously there's a shortage throughout the state, Chittenden County, Richmond, Hinesburg. In terms of laying the groundwork, I didn't have to do a lot to lay the groundwork to establish the committee. It was basically going to the select board and asking them to create another committee. They had other committees already, conservation, and then more formal committees like the DRB, the Planning Commission, and then committees like Affordable Housing, Trails Committee. We had a downtown committee that sort of has fallen apart. So there wasn't a lot of legwork. The select board seemed supportive, and so we were created. The town staff kind of put together the resolution and that type of information, modeled it after some of the other committees. We started with 9 members. We downsized because of lack of participation to 7, and about the same time that you formed, we were able to upsize back to 9 officially, and right now we have 2 vacancies that we're hoping to fill. A key thing, and I don't know how you were created, but and I don't know Richmond staff, but 2 things that were critical for us is a select board that thought affordable housing was important, and a municipal staff in the planning department that also thought that was important. So that made it easier. It wasn't a long uphill battle to get that type of support. On the other hand, it's definitely been a struggle to get support within the community, depending on the project and that type of thing. And we've been successful with some projects, but we don't really know how the community feels as a whole if we were to go to them to seek funding for assisting a project. So I can get more into that with some of your other questions.
Yeah, I think that was maybe the crux of the question, right? Is maybe the community opposition, or the, hey, we love Richmond as it is today, and we don't want to see it change, right? And I think that we get a lot of feedback when we bring up discussions that are potentially going to change what Richmond looks like, right?
Yeah.
Might ask right here, then what was the deciding factor that it sounds like Haystack is moving along? How did that come to fruition where minds came together from a developer and a town standpoint where it made sense for all parties?
I mean, Haystack's a tough case study, but I think that Carl and I early on, I think we talked through the different components of the project, and I feel like it was collaborative, how we came up with creative solutions for us to move through certain requirements of the permitting process while prioritizing the type of housing that Hinesburg is really focused on.
I mean, just to add to that, our zoning regs require developers to meet with the Affordable Housing Committee. And our zoning regs have inclusionary zoning, which triggers required affordable housing units in basically forever. And Ben met with the committee several times throughout before the project came to the town, after it came, and during, because if I'm not mistaken, it wasn't approved the first time. And right, Ben, and then you went to court.
Well, that was way back at the very beginning,
Right.
and really the tides have changed with personnel in Hinesburg, and
Right.
sort of the back end of this has been much easier. But I think that what Carl and I are kind of getting at for a housing committee is there's two ways to do it. Some municipalities just create a box. As a developer, we check the box, and there isn't it's sort of a pass fail, and the underlying rule obviously has to follow those lines of, we have to meet whatever the standard is. However, what we felt was helpful working with the housing committee is anytime that we as a private developer can walk into a preliminary or final plat review and have the letter from the housing committee, have Carl speak on behalf of the housing committee and say, hey, we've really we've worked with these folks, and we're satisfied with this approach, and we encourage the board to accept this approach. I think that becomes a better process for everyone, and I think that the town has the opportunity, or the committee anyway, has an opportunity to weigh in on specific housing needs, because there's just housing. There's a housing need. There's an affordable housing need, capital A. There is housing that's affordable need. And then there's, in the case of Hinesburg, there's a specific type housing needs, so senior housing. So I think taking that, if the committee is able to give constructive feedback and take a collaborative approach with the developer, it helps the developer bring forth the best project for the town and helps them, in theory, move through the process with less resistance.
And
I'm curious, Carl, like your bylaws and Hinesburg requires someone like Mr. Avery's team to engage with you specifically, or
with
does
our
that
committee,
just
yeah.
happen? Okay.
No, it's a requirement for Ben as a for-profit, and then for any nonprofit developer.
Is there a size threshold? I mean, not every single family home developer has to come, right? Or is it?
Right. No, there is a size.
I think it's made for subdivision, isn't it, Carl?
I'm not quite sure.
Okay, a major subdivision. Okay, so a certain number of units.
Right. I mean, so if you're doing a, if you own a home and you're dividing off two lots, I don't think that's the same threshold.
Right. It might be any project that triggers inclusionary zoning, which is 10 units currently.
That's a good, yeah.
That's likely it then.
And so, Carl, have you had a lot of pushback from developers in terms of the expense of these units that are not going to generate the amount of income that may be needed? I mean, that's what we're hearing now, is that any restrictions on forecasted income are going to be a hindrance in terms of getting money to do these projects.
Pushback from the developer or from the
No,
community?
no. Well, yeah, pushback from the developer who would like to say it's going to be impossible to finance this project if in perpetuity I have to keep this rent at some artificially low level.
Well, it depends on, there's been some minor pushback, but I think our bylaws have an out clause, but it hasn't been for rental. The harder one is if you have to make home ownership in basically forever. And Ben thinks he's able to do that. We suggested he work with one of the nonprofits to an equity program that would help bridge that gap. But he's thinking he can do it without that resource. So
I mean,
if a
Go ahead.
project feels they can't do it for rental, that's the first thing they'll say. But it has been done here in Hinesburg by
Well,
for-profit developers.
I think that it depends on it's two different things, right? So if I have to make 1 out of every 10 or 1 out of every 15 units affordable, as long as I can adjust my margins, be it rent or sale on 14 out of the 15 or 9 out of the 10 or whatever it is, then I can sort of be my own subsidy. Where you get pushback is a purely subsidized project. So like a 25 unit building or 30 unit building that is all affordable is not financially feasible without subsidy. It just isn't. Like it's broken. We're at today's interest rates, we're having trouble getting market rate buildings to work. So that is where you get more and more pushback. So I think that some municipalities who I work with have a more blanket approach. You're building 5 buildings, one of them's got to be affordable. Well, that to me means I have to go and find a nonprofit partner or find a tax credit partner, because that's the only way that 5th building gets built. I think when you have mixed use projects that have a variety of housing types like Haystack Crossing, it gets a little easier because you can Haystack's a good example. We've got 10 units that are going to be voucher units in the senior care. We've got a variety of buildings where we can, make 1 out of 5 apartments be an affordable unit. We have a variety of home types where we can focus on some smaller carriage homes and really work on the perpetual affordability of those. So I think I agree there is pushback, but some of it has to do with the project type. The more variety, the larger the project, the more diverse the project, the easier it is to find affordable opportunities.
Yeah, just to echo what Ben said, if any community wanted to bring in one project that had, say, 30 affordable units, a private developer could not ever do that without major state and federal funding. And the ones that have happened in Hinesburg are all through the nonprofit. The for-profit have done it through the inclusionary zoning, which is a 10% of basically 1 out of every 10 units.
Well,
so
one of the challenges has become, I'm going to get on my soapbox here for a second. One of the challenges has become the nonprofits through Evernorth, their developer, have sort of become their own entity. So 15 years ago, I could have developed a project that had 4 buildings in it and approached CHT or somebody and said, hey, I've got this project coming. Are you interested in one of the buildings? That has gotten harder and harder in today's market. The nonprofit entities sort of act as their own developer. So, and I know Carl has facilitated a number of conversations for us over the years, and you would think Haystack would be attractive, but I forget which one it is. Carl's doing the project across the street. They have their own project. They don't need buy buildings. They're building their own buildings, which serves the greater community without a doubt, but it doesn't make it any easier for private developers to get affordable housing or inclusionary components into their project.
Just out of interest, how many units does this project you're talking about have?
247.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So, sorry, just to speak up here, because I was quite interested. So how many of those units are going to be required to sell? Are you going to be selling approximately?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but close to 100.
Wow. So that would be over, it'd be like what, almost 40% of, if you got 247, so almost 40% of them. But what about affordable sale? Sorry, I shouldn't say just for sale, but would be considered affordable sale.
So what we worked on with the housing committee is we've got a certain number that are senior, and those again are rentals. We have a certain number that will be rentals, and we have a certain number earmarked for perpetually affordable. So, and we've got some experience with that. We built a development in Williston over the last few years where 20% of the units were affordable or were perpetually affordable. And you know, anytime you've got 100% AMI town, that's, I mean, 80% again it just doesn't work. You can't build it at today's costs and get it to work.
No,
So
I understand.
But at 100%, we came up with some clever models, and you know, 9 out of 40 units were perpetually affordable.
This is rental units or for sale units or both?
For sale.
For sale units, okay. So.
Yep. And what the one request we did have for Hinesburg as we came to the end of this project is some flexibility in the timing of those, because right now at 8% money and today's building costs, even 100% is impossible. And it's not even the building costs so much. It's we can control that to a certain extent by controlling the product. It's the 8% money. It breaks every the cost to get the money for the homeowner is just crushing. And the way that those calculations are done is it's the 33% of average market income, and all housing costs need to be included. So when your interest rates go from 4% to 8%, you know, you're talking about on a $400,000 home, you know, you're talking about the cost of the interest doubling, and it just decimates that whole program. Now, once the interest rate's correct, that gets easier to do. But I can tell you from experience that at 100% AMI and a reasonable interest rate, it can be done.
Thank you.
Carl, just getting back to a little bit around like town support or the support of the community. Has the Hinesburg Affordable Housing Committee, what has been your approach to encourage support, sway the tide to show that, hey, housing might be good or is good for our community? What have you done there, if anything?
So as I said, it's important to have the select board on board with the issue, and obviously any municipal staff, but primarily in the planning department, that are sort of dealing with this all the time. But the other thing is we attend DRB meetings, we provide written comment. That may or may not get to the general public. It just depends how involved people want to be in terms of either attending a meeting, reading the minutes, reading highlights of meetings, in the newspaper. So that's how we sort of are involved sort of project by project. The thing we've started to do this past January is we're writing monthly articles in our local newspaper that's monthly, and then republishing those in the weekly newspaper that comes out right the week that comes out after the monthly, to just sort of highlight some of the affordable housing issues that were in our housing needs assessment updated by the Regional Planning Commission. So we're doing that to try to reach out to the general public, because we would like to be able to go to the voters for funding. We have a small pot of money now because of a community development block grant that we received for an economic development project, and a Cathedral Square project in town was seeking money to buy down some of their fees. And we tried to use ARPA funds for that because the town received 1.3 million. We weren't successful in that, but the revolving loan fund from the economic development project, 50,000 from there was granted to Cathedral Square. So the decision was 100,000 of that revolving loan fund would be for affordable housing. So we still have 50,000 in that revolving loan fund. And the connection is, if you talk to almost any business, affordable housing for their employees is a major issue. So it's not a stretch to use that revolving loan fund that originated. It was from Vermont Smoke and Cure that moved into Hinesburg. And in addition, we were able to get 30,000 in ARPA funds for a Green Mountain Habitat project several months ago. So, but that's probably the only ARPA funds we will be able to get out of the 1.3 million. There's major projects by the nonprofit, the one Ben mentioned across the street. There are other Habitat for Humanity. So the only way we can grow that revolving loan fund or a housing trust fund is with little amounts of money each year that go into a fund that doesn't go away at the end of the fiscal year, or to seek funding from the town to put money into that housing trust fund. We didn't feel comfortable doing that this past March because we hadn't done enough of the groundwork. So we're hoping that these monthly articles that talk about affordable housing, and in reality, when you look at Front Porch Forum, the headlines in the legislature, the headlines everywhere, there's a lack of affordable housing. There's a lack of the housing for the middle. So we're hoping that in combination with the recognition of this issue nationally, state, and local, and our articles, we would be able to, either this March or the following March, put an article before the voters to try to raise money to put into a housing trust fund. I don't know if we'll be successful, but we didn't feel comfortable all these years until affordable housing became it's just a headline everywhere. So we're hopeful. We think we need to tie it maybe to a specific project, or we would do something that would put some amount of money every year into this housing trust fund. There's no lack of potential ways to use the funds, but we didn't really feel comfortable just saying, oh, just give us a pot of money and we'll figure out how to use it. We want to try to connect it to a specific project.
And did you actively have people, members of the public come out when projects were being reviewed and be opposed to them, or not really?
I don't know if there might have been some opposition to some of the aspects of Ben's, and when we comment, we only comment on affordable housing. There could be floodplain issues, conservation issues. I don't know if any committee came out directly opposed to it, but they might have raised issues to the DRB, and the DRB, again, I didn't follow it exactly to see if they made a condition that addressed some of the concerns. There have been projects, the first project, we have a Green Street project now, but the first project that was planned and sort of brought forward, there was a lot of neighbor opposition to that, and the project actually didn't fit on the property the way the nonprofit thought, so they actually partnered with a for-profit developer who built the units and turned it over to them as a turnkey, and that's the Green Street project in town. So it depends on the project. Cathedral Square project had really no opposition because it was senior housing. The footprint wasn't really expanding. And the neighbors that were nearby were very happy to see an additional 24 units.
And I think that different towns are challenging it at different times. And I've done projects in every major community in Chittenden County. And I can tell you that when you get a process, and when I say a process, I mean the Development Review Board, sort of murky zoning or zoning that has gray area, and sort of competing committees that take a very idealistic approach to things and not a realistic approach to things. As an example, the Energy Committee in Hinesburg proposed that we build 100 homes all in marching rows facing the same direction with the same ridge lines. So, I mean, things like that in a process are not helpful because they're not realistic. When I see towns and committees that have a tight process, Williston has a very tight, good process. Essex has a very tight, good process. Those are towns where the committees weigh in. They're towns where I meet with the committees out of courtesy, not even because I'm mandated to necessarily. But they're towns where the town plan is very crisp, the zoning is very crisp. Board members are aligned on what the zoning is, and there's just, it feels like there's more of an overall mission where everybody's aligned, and that for a developer is much easier. It's harder when we have to come in and fight all these little skirmishes, and there's some stuff that makes sense and there's other stuff that doesn't, and what that ends up creating is just a challenging process, and a challenging process for us translates to a Development Review Board. A DRB can tell when we have a challenging process going on because you've got people and all these conflicting opinions, and you're always going to have the NIMBY. You're always going to have the neighbor that's going to, say that it shouldn't happen for whatever reason, and potentially appeal it. That's not anything the town can do anything about. But I would say that overall, focusing on a process where committees, board members, town staff are aligned and working in sync is going to make the community more attractive to do business in for developers. Is going to make the process easier for developers, which in the end, it's a symbiotic relationship. I say that sometimes and people look at me like I'm crazy, but at the end of the day, we all have to work with you to move through a process, and you need us to build the housing. So the better process, the better working relationship.
Have you ever looked at a potential project here in Richmond and what maybe scared you off?
I
on
would
some
love
things
to
that-
do it. I would love to do a project in Richmond, and I have tried working in your high density residential to the north of the interstate. That's a private sector problem. You've got some challenging landowners up there who don't, and then landowners who would like to sell, but don't have a realistic grip on the cost of the infrastructure to open that up. I can't remember who I spoke to with town staff, but we've definitely looked up there before and had a very positive, we definitely have a favorable view of it. It's an area where I would love to do a deal and do a housing project. That's just, landowners are tough, and they see high density zoning, and of course everybody approaches it as if it's already permitted. So but there's great opportunity there, and I think that the other place that a village like Richmond, and you've got a decent sized water sewer corridor, taking a look at what the rules and regs are for existing lot subdivision, ADUs, things like that. I mean, obviously ADUs are effectively a fast pass at this point, but making any kind of infill relatively easy really helps grow the density of a town center. And with the changes at the state level, it's fairly easy to put together. So I think that creating very attractive redevelopment opportunity or infill opportunity is also a great way to bolster additional housing. And Richmond's a great town because you have a walkable downtown. It's very centralized. Like, Hinesburg's actually a little harder because it's very difficult to move around Hinesburg right now without a vehicle. Richmond, with its existing sidewalk system and pedestrian, is pretty good. Hinesburg is getting better, but Richmond is really kind of has that nailed down.
Mark, I'm gonna have to jump off in a few minutes. If you have any other specific questions before that, just want to let you know that.
Great. Well, I know I've peppered you a bunch of questions. I don't know if any of my committee members here had any other questions for Carl before he has to jet. I have more. I just wanted to give an opportunity for you guys to ask anything for Carl. All right. Well, let's see. I think the last question would be, I think we've talked, you've addressed some of the best partnerships maybe within the community that are helpful to nurture. But how about outside of the town community? What partnerships have you sought after? Have you tried to nurture to help with your goals there in Hinesburg?
Well, I had the advantage of working in the housing field with many of the nonprofits and the for-profits. But when we started out, we met with sort of all the key players, some for-profit developers, the regional nonprofits, the statewide nonprofits, the senior nonprofits. So I've sort of kept a relationship, and our committee has met with them periodically. We had a changeover in staff when we went, not in staff, but in our membership. Some people left, and then we expanded to 9. We sort of went through that process again, just to bring people up to speed. And things are different since COVID. So it was important to sort of get the lay of the land. So I'd say our outside network are some of the nonprofits that we've worked with. We actually are developing maybe a relationship with the National Bank of Middlebury. We invited one of their staff to talk about how they looked at affordable housing. So we've just sort of reached out. We've talked with people that are in the mobile home park field for the state and CVOEO. So we just try to keep in touch with all the different players, try to understand the funding that might be available, might be coming down the road. So And the other thing is, if you have anybody in your community who works for a for-profit, and one of our community members does work for a for-profit or work for a nonprofit, even if they're not on your committee, they're a really good resource because they'll know the other people in the housing field, and it's a big alphabet soup. So anyone that's working on a project usually knows the other players. The Regional Planning Commission staff is a good resource too, and they've held, and you've probably been a part of it. They try to hold housing committee meetings 2 times a year. They try to do more, but I don't know if it's ever been more than twice. So that's kind of the way. And then if you can develop and we haven't done this, but we might want to do this, develop non-committee members, but community members who see affordable housing as an important thing for the town to be working on. You can have them involved in whatever processes you're dealing with, or any articles you want to bring before the voters. So it's more than just your committee working on this. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's
Yeah.
something we've been able to do.
Yeah, that is, and I might offline pick your brain for some folks' names to that might be good to invite into our Richmond committee here.
Do any of you know Molly Dugan?
Mm-hmm. She lives here. Yeah.
She lives there. She's with Cathedral Square.
Mm-hmm.
And so she has a lot of inside knowledge and can connect you with other organizations. That's the only person I know in Richmond who is sort of working in the nonprofit housing field.
Do you know Miranda Lascazi?
I know that name, but only because she worked with on Cathedral Square, but I think she's left Cathedral Square. I'm not sure where she's working
She's
now.
at PHFA now.
So yeah, PHFA is a group to bring in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she was on this committee for a while, but it was too difficult, I mean, too much.
Right.
Both her and Molly Dugan are helpful to us, and, we'll come out and testify at planning commission meetings about supporting affordable housing, but it's hard to get them more involved than that. Anyway, they're useful to have.
Right.
Yeah.
And they can probably line you up with other
Yeah.
staff at other organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
So I need to run. I have another meeting at 7 for our regular housing meeting.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Mark,
thank you.
If you have other questions, feel free to email me, or we can chat on the phone. If you'd like me to attend another meeting in the future, that's possible too.
Do you all meet once a month, or every couple of weeks, or what? Once a month?
Once a month. The summer, July, August, we sometimes just combine it into one meeting, but we already have one meeting in July and we're going to be scheduling another one. So, but yeah, pretty much once a month, unless we have to meet more. And then you might be attending a select board meeting in addition, or a DRB meeting, or a planning commission meeting. So, but we formally try to meet once a month.
Okay.
The
Great.
fourth Wednesday, same Wednesday that you do every month.
Okay.
So, all right. Well, thanks for the invite, Ben. I hope you get good news soon.
Just waiting.
Yeah. All right. Take care, everyone.
Appreciate it, Carl.
Yes,
for
thank you
joining
so
us.
much.
All right. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Great.
Well, I've got a couple more minutes if you have any other questions.
Yeah, what questions do we have for Ben? And I appreciate you joining as well tonight, Ben.
So let's see. How did you come across the property that you were interested in Hinesburg? This was like 5 years ago or something, right? It's been a while, but
Yeah, it's been a while.
10 years.
My office is in the Keller Williams building. So that's how I know Andrew Mannix. So there's never a shortage of folks in the real estate industry who love to bring stuff to my desk.
Where is that building? Where is this building?
Our office is in South Burlington.
Oh, South Burlington. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So that's how it came across my desk. That's how most things come across my desk. And really, we do a pretty quick evaluation when we look at a parcel. You know, we do a quick zoning evaluation, a quick density analysis, and then we've sort of, in modern times, we've added an infrastructure analysis of, you know, exactly how difficult is this going to be to, you know, to move an infrastructure package forward. That's become a major movable. And you know, and then we have a metric of what we can pay for the land, and it works or it doesn't.
So Virginia, basically, people like me come across landowners that are looking for an opportunity, and we connect them with people like Ben. That's one way that these developers find these projects. The other is, once a private developer has a reputation, somebody might own 98 acres in Richmond and might approach Ben and say, "Hey Ben, I got this land. What can you do?" And they may go into partnership and see it. But sometimes those landowners are very skewed on, well, it's quarter-acre zoning here. Like Governor Peck, there's David Villeneuve or whomever, whatever his last name is. He had land in a quarter-acre. It's great. You got to put a bridge in and this and that and wetlands, and it's just not as simple as there's 25 acres with quarter-acre zoning. So those folks come to Ben and say, "How can I make this happen?" And people like me find landowners with 100 acres that are trying to find a partner because they don't have the ability to take down $3 million in financing.
So, yeah, I mean, so we've always kind of thought of one of the problems that we see in Richmond are the water and sewer ordinance, the way it's arranged. It's not, you know, it's not easy for developers to, I guess, come up with a project that's big enough to support developing all that new infrastructure. That's one project. And then the land in Richmond is scarce, kind of. We think Hinesburg has more flat land. I mean, Williston certainly has more flat land. We have a lot of hills, and, you know, I guess that makes things cost more, but you're thinking there are places, if the sellers were willing, that landowners were willing. I don't know. I mean,
and one of the market metrics that's just become more challenging is it is helpful that houses are selling from where real estate's more expensive. It does give us some latitude. However, there's also downward pressure on development values. So when we look at a project, if our site costs are 30% more than they were 4 years ago, and that becomes sort of a fixed cost, and then, you know, we need to account for you know, impact fees and permitting fees, and it's sort of a never ending, I will knock it on my soapbox here, but at A&R, it's a never ending. I paid $90,000 for bobbling. Like it's, so when you start talking about a larger scale project, which costs $1 million literally to permit, and then that's only then do you get the privilege of paying impact fees and all these other things. That creates downward pressure on the land value. So, you know, one of the things that, you know, that I spoke at the developers conference a couple of years ago, and, you know, one of the things that I said, and it's a good frame of mind for folks to keep in mind, there are no fees to developers. We don't pay any fees. We're a middleman. So we don't pay any costs. We're all a middleman. So the more cost that goes into a project, and whether that is in the form of A&R fees, whether that is in the form of needing to provide X amount of affordable housing, which is at no margin or a loss, all of that comes in And then what you get out the end is that's why you have your crazy high housing prices right now, because in the end, there are no fees to us. There are no costs to us.
Yeah.
It's all a cost model that gets supplemented by the buyer. And sometimes he's creating downward pressure on the seller. And almost the bigger project, the harder it is. So to do 8 houses isn't that complicated. I can really get my arms around it. When you start talking about 80 houses, well, that's, now you're into every phase of review everywhere. So it's really a complex issue. And, that's why I said earlier, I always, when somebody asks me this question, encourage folks when they have a village core, how do you figure out? I mean, the city of Essex Junction is trying to figure out infill. I don't think there's a square patch of grass in the city of Essex Junction, and yet there's still like, how do we encourage infill? How do we encourage? Because that's very, very easy. It grows the tax base. It's on municipal services. It's already in a relatively dense area, and it creates housing with just less drag on the process. So I think cities and towns have to look at it as, yes, how do we make these big projects a possibility, but also how do we make small projects a possibility? Because that's where a lot of your numbers or shorter term numbers growth can come from. 245 unit project can be in permitting for 10 years. And that's, I have 32 units in South Burlington in the Southeast Quadrant that I'm in court on, that I've been working on for 5 years. But 4 units out back of somebody's house near the bridge, if you make it easy, that brings 4 more units.
Right. Well, that has been an easier sell for us, the infill, in terms of the public. But, since it's a town that comes off forever, we've just had 1 dwelling unit per 1 acre zoning. We're getting off that and increasing the density somewhat, but you can only take it so far before people start freaking out.
I haven't read up on your PUD rules. I mean, for these larger tracts of land, a PUD approach where we might be putting 4 units per acre, but we're conserving the unused acreage.
We do have that.
Yeah, that's helpful. And it makes it more economical. Sometimes I've seen municipalities tack restrictions onto that, or additional items that you have to do as a component of a PUD. That I don't know if that's helpful or not in some
Ben,
cases.
I'm the kind of small time developer you're talking about. We've done about 30 units, and most of them have been, 2 or 3 units in a property's backyard, right? I bought a single family home, built 2 houses behind it. So that's kind of been my bread and butter over the last 6-8 years. And really, speaking to your point, I got tied up in court for 3.5 years to build 1 ADU in Winooski by a neighbor that didn't like it. And so just kind of pointing to the fact that it doesn't even take a big project to get tied up in court, and so on and so forth. And the permitting cost and the engineering cost, and even on small projects, the triggers are still hit. Like, I'm about to go through a PUD process here in Richmond on a property I just built, and I'm going to have to go through that entire process for 1 unit because of the way it's set up. So, I mean, it can happen on all scales. And I stopped building rental units actually 2 years ago because of interest rates and because of the pressure on me. And we've switched to building, single family homes and selling them, because I don't have to get every inspector, engineer, you know, it's a local permit. I don't have to get a state permit, so on and so forth. So
No, it's a challenging business, and you know, back to kind of what I said earlier, the towns that are a pleasure to, I'm always going to have the NIMBYs. There's always going to be some neighbor who doesn't like something, and you either negotiate in landscaping or you go to court. But the towns that are just, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure dealing with Matt Bollinger and Williston. It's a pleasure dealing with that board. They're organized, they're concise, their rules are clear. You know, Melinda Bolton is a friend and told me once, she said, this is the easiest business in the world if you just color inside the lines. And you know, there's a lot of truth to that. And so what we're always pleased with in engaging a municipality in a process is when the lines are really clear, and it's got to be red here and blue here. And it really gives us a roadmap to bringing forth a successful project and to meeting the town's needs and desires for growth, and its growth in all sectors. And I don't think inclusionary items are scary. I think that a good way to look at affordable housing is, how can we create developer incentives that do not require subsidy? So when you look at 100% AMI stuff, like, how does that work? I've got a bunch of 100% AMI apartments. It works. Doesn't work for a 2-bedroom, but it works. I can do studios in ones. And so, you know, I like doing business in towns where I build a 40-unit building, and sure, I'll do 20% of those units inclusionary, not a problem. And what those sorts of policies effectively create is rent control. It's rent control as set by AMI. It's not capital A affordable, but what it does is it perpetually ties rents or for sale to your average market income.
Well, it's more workforce housing, which is what we need probably the most, I bet.
It's not affordable housing, it's housing that's affordable.
You don't have an income sensitive piece, you just use the numbers, right?
Just
The
use
AMI and the size of the unit and the
Yep.
maximum rent, so it's a rent control strategy. Yep.
And,
Okay.
and what we do is we have a on rentals, it's the property manager's job to keep, you know, he knows he has to keep 10 redacted leases on file at all times, and if there's oversight, some of these buildings don't even have oversight, but on the ones that have oversight, no problem, here they are. You know, these units are all fit within the matrix. And then on the perpetually affordable, what we do, which actually works really well, when we go through the permitting process, we create a 1-page form with the town that is a required submittal prior to closing that's signed off by the zoning administrator. And we do it in the initial sale as the developer, but then it gets turned over to the association. But basically it's like a little worksheet that says, this is, you know, attached is the current HUD chart. This is the sale price of the home. This is the interest rate. These are the association fees. This is the total. It's below the number. Zoning administrator signs, property transfers. And it's a deed restriction on the perpetually affordable. So it's actually in the deed.
So that is, if it's sold, it will have to, but if it's not sold, you don't have any form year after year, right? On that.
No, because when it
only that would be on a rental unit, you would have to do it on a year by year basis.
Correct. But at a perpetually affordable, your only point of confirmation is at transfer.
Yeah.
You know, and what the reason I like those sorts of programs for perpetually affordable is you're slowly building sort of an army of these homes that are going to not grow astronomically at the rates that we've seen. And so it doesn't seem like a lot to have 10 here or 5 there or 8 there, but once you start adding them up over time, and the more developers to take advantage of this and towns that utilize this as an affordable component, it's forever. And this is housing that will be here for 50 years, and for 50 years it is capped at that, or 100 years, or whatever it is. And that's meaningful. It's meaningful today, and it's meaningful 10 years from now.
And I got a question for you. These affordable units that are for sale, how are they managed regarding, like, I know how CHT does their affordable for sale units in terms of, they take a certain percentage of the equity to kind of maintain the program. And then the homeowner, if they sell, gets a certain percentage. I think it's like 65 to 35%. How does it work for you guys when it comes to that process? Because that's kind of, I've always thought the CHT process is, quite frankly, sharecropping.
Ours, you got to sell it at the price.
I'm sorry?
You got to sell it at the price. You got to build it and sell it at the price. There is no subsidy. There is no share back. That's it.
So you're not going to get down the road. There's no administration where you're going to get X percentage of the sale when it sells again to administer it.
Nope. If
Okay.
that house, $397,000.
Yep.
I just sold it to you for $397,000, and you own it.
And if they go to sell it again, how are they restricted? They're restricted in sale price to 100% AMI. So whatever 100% AMI is in 10 years or whatever.
Yep.
Okay.
So basically what it means is your values growing. I mean, when we look back at the last decade or 20 years, we've seen, appreciation rates over the last 10 to 15 years at, anywhere from 7 to 10% a year on market rate housing. These are growing at maybe 3. So it really does. It's not to buy one of these homes. You got to qualify for a mortgage. You got to have 2 jobs, or you got to have the income. But it really is for folks that have just totally been priced out, or I find that I was having this discussion down in Central Vermont with a group where we were doing it, and the woman on the affordable housing committee is like, well, this is ridiculous. It's $400,000 for a new home. And the fire chief piped up and he said, well, right now, $400,000 gets you a fixer-upper in this town and buys you the privilege of putting another 100 into it. He's like, so, yeah, it doesn't sound like capital A affordable housing. He said, but, I think that, I forget, he used his daughter or something. He's like, but if my daughter could have bought, instead of spending $425 on a house that needed $150, if she could have bought a house for $400 that needed nothing, that's huge. It's massive. So I think in some ways, it's helpful to look at things in context. And it is unfortunate, but the reality is $400,000 is affordable.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you from my perspective too. That's kind of yeah.
And would you make these kind of units if you weren't required to? I mean, this is with inclusionary zoning that requires you to make. Would you do this housing without that requirement?
I don't make very much money on it, so if I'm going to give you the pure capitalist answer, probably
Right.
not. But it is what it is. It's a path for a win-win, and it's a path where a community can make an inclusionary requirement where you're going to get less pushback from developers. And if I'm building 40 houses and I make a whole pile of money on 31 of them and I make a little money on the other 9, so be it. And that is just, and I am a purely for-profit developer. I don't do any affordable housing, nothing. I don't manage any affordable housing. I don't own any affordable housing. I have no problem working with towns on inclusionary. I think it's an important piece of how we begin to solve this problem. I think it's an important piece of how we sort of grow a broad spectrum community of different demographics. I think it's all very important. And I participated in it in almost every project I've ever done.
And are there any carrots that would make you do it as opposed to sticks, as it were?
Oh, if you can I've said this for years, if you can streamline fee schedules, people do it in a second. You know, and I don't know if there's anything you do about the state, but at town levels, you know, a lot of the water and sewer fees are through the roof now. You know, you're talking, I have a lot of municipalities where I'm paying holding fees, and then it costs me another 16 grand to get my water and sewer. You know, those are the sorts of things where if municipalities can figure out ways to create financial incentives to do additional inclusionary housing, that becomes more attractive. You know, the fees are not insignificant. I did the project I'm just wrapping up in Williston. I did a little analysis, and when all was said and done, and this doesn't count court or civil engineering or anything. This is simply, I describe it as a check that was made out to town of or state of. We're at about $17,000 a unit. That's how much it was. And then there's all the other costs on top of it.
Right.
But that's a serious bargaining chip. It's real money. I don't know that I made 17,000 on any one of those affordable units. I don't think I did. And certainly if you average them, I didn't. So, you know, I think that's a card that a municipality can play. And you know, I'm sort of, you know, shooting the higher end consumer in the foot here. But if it means that instead of $16,000, the water and sewer fees are $18,000 for all the rich folk who can afford it, and for affordable housing projects it's a pass, then maybe that's part of the solution. But there's real cost.
Right.
Great. Well, I know we're coming to the end of time, and some folks have to leave. Any last words of advice you would give us in the town of Richmond, Ben, as a parting word of advice? You haven't already provided.
You know, one word is collaborative. Just with the private sector, the more collaboration there is, the better it is. And I understand not all developers take the same approach as I do. It is not a us and you. Without collaboration, there are no houses. So anytime there's an opportunity through policy, through interaction, through you know, collaborative thinking, anytime there is an opportunity to work together to find a win-win, that I think just makes it more attractive and make it as easy as possible. That's if the reason you see so much development in Williston and Essex, and you see less of it in South Burlington, is just because it's really, really difficult. Hinesburg historically has been very, very difficult. Hinesburg created their town center 20 years ago almost. They did a visualization study in 2006 or 2007, and the majority of it hasn't been built yet. and because it was hard and because nobody wanted to agree, and it was just an incredibly challenging environment. That, and they never did their village center designation, which is a mystery to me, but they didn't, so that made it even harder. But there was just no collaboration, no cooperation. Everything was a fight.
Well, we don't have that issue here in Richmond, so.
Ho, 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 ho. That's funny. That's funny.
Well, thank you for
Yeah.
taking the time to listen, and always happy to chat with a committee.
Fantastic.
Great. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks,
I
Ben.
mean,
Thanks
Thank you,
so
Ben.
much.
Really
Appreciate you
appreciate it,
joining.
Ben.
Thanks, Andrew,
Glad
for
you
helping to
came.
arrange, make the
Yeah.
introduction.
All right, enjoy the evening.
good
All right.
luck. Good luck
a good
with
one.
your haystack project.
Oh, it'll move forward.
You will.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
Bye.
Yep.
All right. Well, knowing that we have some folks that need to head out here in a minute, one thing that we started last week was putting the bones together of a strategy document. I'm going to put together an email to send out. Obviously, we can't collaborate by chatting outside of our meeting as a group. We can do that one-on-one, right? Just keeping with meeting laws. I would like you guys to take a look at some of the outline. We have constructed it last week, and think about, like, how do we maybe develop some of these different areas within the outline around development partners, water, sewer, tax abatement programs and strategies, a housing fund. How do we look at these different facets that could be levers that we pull, and what could we do for a next step? So looking at maybe what's in existence today in Richmond, what we would like to see in some of these areas, and how do we get there? So my hope or thought, and is up for discussion as well, is that maybe we could have some smaller groups or individuals do some research and start to maybe build out a small outline as to answering those kinds of 3 questions per section. We started to do some division last meeting, but I'll send out an email with some instructions on that, and then maybe we can regroup next session to talk through our thoughts.
So our next meeting is Wednesday, July 24th at 5:30.
Yes.
Works for people's calendars.
That's what we have.
Okay,
Just looking.
we're all checking, and at least one piece is a framework for housing development support or something like that. You'll share the name of your document, Mark. And then we can come back to maybe some of the items that we didn't get to discuss or finish discussing tonight.
Yep.
Yeah, I may not be able to meet on that day. I'll be traveling on the 24th.
Okay.
But
Okay. Well, if we have other folks that can't meet, let us know sooner rather than later, so that we can maybe adjust if need be.
I can make it.
Okay.
Andrew's thumbs up. Nick's thumbs up.
Great.
So that gives us a quorum.
Okay. Great.
I thought that was a good brain dump from those two. It was interesting from the
Yeah.
2 sides of the street, so I thought that was very helpful.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was great.
especially
Excellent.
since they were working on the same project. That was
Yeah.
kind of
Very
pretty
good.
interesting.
So glad you
Yeah.
did
Thank
that,
you
Andrew.
for bringing in Andrew, Benjamin Andrew. I thought that was a great discussion, and gave some great tidbits. Because I think we've been maybe a little timid in our discussions around the stick approach or inclusionary zoning as being a big turnoff for developers. Maybe it's less so than we thought.
Yeah, there's some real opportunities there. That was good.
Perfect.
Okay, adjourned at 7:01.
And that sounds great.
All
Thank you
right,
all.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Good
Thank
night.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.